timeless voices of the eternal church.
By moonlight, they pulled their small boat into the shore of Lake Mayasa. Fiercely painted warriors leaped from the jungle onto the beach, waving their spears. David Livingston's porters raised their guns in defense against the dreaded Masutu. "Wait!" Livingston ordered. He stepped from the boat and opened his shirt, exposing the ghostly whiteness of his skin. Cautiously, one warrior moved forward, his spear extended. He brought the tip to Livingston's chest and drew it slowly down across the skin. A tiny trickle of blood, looking black in the pale light, followed the sharp point. Suddenly, the warriors let out a frightened cry, turned, and fled back into the jungle. David Livingston was a curious combination of missionary, doctor, explorer, scientist, and anti-slavery activist. He spent 30 years in Africa, traveling 29,000 miles to explore almost a third of the continent, from its southern tip almost to the equator. He was the first white to see Victoria Falls and cross the continent west to east. Livingston was born March 19, 1813, on an island off the coast of Scotland and grew up in a Christian home. After receiving a degree in medicine from Glasgow University in 1840, he joined the London Missionary Society. With the society's support, he went to South Africa in 1841. He ventured north by lumbering ox wagon on a 10-week trip. But when he saw all what was happening, it troubled him. The mission station he visited seemed more interested in creating comfortable British outposts than pressing on to reach the unreached people of the interior. He also discovered that some of the missionaries were racist, thinking the Africans were unsuited for much more than servants or field hands. On one of the shorter foray into the bush, a lion attacked and mauled Livingston. It took months for him to recover, and the injuries to his shoulders bothered him for the rest of his life. Mary Moffat, the daughter of Dr. Robert Moffat, Bible translator and mission director, nursed him until he was back to health and in love with her. Shortly after they were married in 1844, the Livingstons set out to establish a new mission station on the frontier. From there, it was Livingston's intention to travel deep into Africa to reach people who had never heard the gospel before. On his first journey, he became aware of the devastation of the slave trade. When he returned to England in 1856, the Royal Geographic Society honored him as a major explorer, and the government commissioned him to return to Africa as a British consul. He went back to Africa on his second expedition and started up the Zambezi River by riverboat. There, he intended to establish Christian mission stations in the hope of spreading the gospel and stopping the slave trade. It was while he was away exploring Lake Nyasa that Bishop Mackenzie, who had come to Africa to join the mission trip, made a canoe on which he foolishly carried all the mission's medicines. The canoe capsized, losing the medicines. By the time Livingston got back, everyone was so sick with malaria that the bishop and all the women died, including Livingston's wife, Mary. Shortly after that, Livingston came across an official dispatch that conclusively proved that the Portuguese were behind the current slave trade. He sent off this proof to England, thinking that the government would put intentional pressure on Portugal. However, England chose to maintain good relationships with Portugal rather than embarrass their ally by exposing the Portugal's violation of the treaty against the slave trade. To avoid any further incidents, England ordered Livingston out of Africa. Years later, Livingston returned on his own and went deep into the interior, out of contact with the outside world. Many thought him dead until the New York Herald sent reporter Henry Stanley on an exhibition to find him or bring back conclusive news of his death. In March 1871, Stanley started out his search from Zanzibar. In the fall, he finally located Livingston. The doctor was sick and out of supplies, but in good spirits. Their meeting is remembered by Stanley's famous words, "Dr. Livingston, I presume, though grateful for the visit and the fresh medicines and supplies, Livingston would not come out of Africa." Stanley, however, returned to worldwide fame. When Livingston died on April 30, 1873, faithful African converts wrapped and embalmed his body and carried it 1,000 miles to the coast for transport to England.
Reading from the complete book of Christian heroes, over 200 stories of courageous people who suffered for Jesus, compiled by Dave and Neta Jackson. This is the Eternal Church of Jesus Christ, the record.